Hello and welcome to Module 4 of the Standards Mastery Framework Workshop. Today we'll be looking at the evidence blueprints. Just as a reminder, the Standards Mastery Framework is a set of tools designed to ensure a guaranteed and viable curriculum and deeper personalization of the learning experience for Fulton County students. The tools include learning maps with prioritized standards, proficiency scales, and evidence blueprints. In addition, assessment items and tasks, scoring guides for those items, exemplars, and scales for reporting student success are part of the framework. Ultimately, the Standards Mastery Framework helps teachers answer the four essential questions of what do students know, how do we know that they know it, what do we do if they don't know it, and what do we do if they do know it. So in Module 2, we looked specifically at the prioritized standards, and we talked about how the learning architects identified those. In Module 3, we looked at the proficiency scales, and we looked to see how the proficiency was broken up from a scale of 0.0 up to a 4.0. In this module, we'll be looking at the evidence blueprint that helps guide teachers when they're planning for assessing of the standards. Again, this is just an overview of what the learning maps look like. We have the prioritized standard, the proficiency scale, the DOK level, and the evidence blueprint all on one. So how does having an evidence blueprint support assessing students' true levels of mastery of a standard? So as I mentioned before, the evidence blueprint is on the left side of the learning map. So again, up at the top, we have the prioritized standard. On the left-hand side, we have the proficiency scale. Again, it goes from 0.0, meaning they cannot do anything related to the standard, even with help, all the way up to a 4.0. Fulton County considers a 3.0 as the level of mastery that we hope all students can achieve. Obviously, if we can have them achieve at a higher level, even better, but ultimately 3.0 is considered mastery of the standard. Then in the middle, we have the DOK level. As you notice, for this particular standard, the highest DOK is 2, and that just means that for this standard, that's as high as it goes. So if you notice here at the 3.0 scale of mastery, it reads that the student will partition shapes into parts with equal areas. That is at the DOK level 1. So again, that's saying that if a student can do those things, even though it is at a depth of knowledge level 1, we consider that to be mastery. On the right-hand side, the evidence blueprint aligns to the proficiency scales. And what the blueprint does is it provides the type of evidence, such as a performance task, selected response, constructed response, so on and so forth, and the amount of evidence. So is that one task? Is it 2 questions? How many times does that student need to show proficiency on that item for the teacher to say that the student has mastered that concept or that standard? So again, the evidence in a learning map is comprised of assessment items or tasks that students must complete accurately in order to demonstrate mastery at a specific level. Again, the DOK level is included, and you'll also find that there is some choice for teachers in how they will assess the mastery. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about the different types, specifically the personal communication that you may or may not have heard before. The assessment items that have been created by the learning architects are in what has been called the Learning Object Repository, and those items are housed in the Illuminate testing platform. So how do the amount and type of evidence required for mastery of a standard contribute to greater personalization for students? Well, ultimately, it provides flexibility for students to show mastery, and in addition, it provides flexibility for teachers in how to assess that mastery. So the next 4 slides show the 5 primary types of evidence for the 4 core contents: language arts, math, science, and social studies. I am going to flip through these quickly, but as before, I will share this PowerPoint with you so you can take a closer look. But as you can see, We have selected response. That's pretty much your typical multiple choice, fill in the blank. Probably not a true false, but that could fall underneath there. You have your constructed response, extended response, performance task, and then personal communication. And again, I will go into more detail about what that really looks like. So here's the language arts one, math, science, and social studies. So how can personal communication be used as a form of learning evidence? So personal communication is really an alternate way of assessing student understanding. It's a non-traditional assessment, and it's typically not as, or it doesn't have to be as structured as, say, a multiple choice test or a multiple choice and a constructed response test. Personal communication can look differently. It can be a question and answer between teachers and students. It could be a class or a small group discussion, a conference or an interview, a journal, or in some capacities, just a student demonstrating that skill. So it is important to remember that with personal communication comes the ability or the reality that there might be some bias. So teachers should just be aware if they are choosing to use personal communication as a means to assess students' mastery of skills, that they are able to gather information in an unbiased manner, and ways that they can make sure that they do that is by keeping good notes, asking questions that are consistent across different students, and trying their very best to not make assumptions of what students know or understand, as opposed to observing what they can or cannot do. As long as teachers are aware of those biases, personal communication can be used in different situations, and the Standards Mastery Framework just wants to have that alternate assessment piece, because we all know that sometimes we can sit down and work with a kid and see that they have mastered that concept or skill without them having to take an assessment. So that is all for Module 4, going over the evidence blueprints. Ultimately, evidence blueprints allows for teachers to ensure that their assessments are rigorous enough for the standard, and not just rigorous, but also aligned, so that students have the opportunity to show mastery of the standard. Please fill out the survey, and I have a great day.